everybody. I'm Noelle Howey, Senior Director of Cultural Engagement at Everytown for Gun Safety, the nation's largest gun violence prevention organization. I want to thank ATX for convening us to discuss gun safety depictions on television, specifically the accurate portrayal seen in the show Unbelievable. And I want to thank the festival for partnering on Wear Orange. We wear orange on National Gun Violence Awareness Day, the first Friday every June. Orange is what hunters wear to protect themselves and others in the woods, and what we wear to honor the hundreds killed and injured by guns every single day in America. Coronavirus is exacerbating the gun violence crisis and disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities. And of course, both those epidemics are connected to this nation's legacy of racism. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chief Daniel Isom. He's the former St. Louis Metropolitan Police Chief and Senior Law Enforcement Advisor to Everytown, to say a few words about what's been happening in this country this week.
Thank you, Noelle, for inviting me. You know, we all deserve to live in a world that's free of violence, whether we're in our homes or in the streets, and we all must take a stance against injustice and racism. The killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers has really intensified this conversation around police use of deadly force and certainly its disproportionate impact of people of color. Most people who die as a result of police actions die from being shot by a gun. And then Black Americans represent the majority of gun homicide victims in America. But coupled with that, Blacks are also die at the hands of police at a rate 2 times the rate of white Americans. So as we go into Wear Orange weekend, I hope that we all must come together, and we come together to take a stance against this deadly mix of guns and racism. So that is my hope as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Chief. I'm honored to have you here, and we're honored to have a really amazing panel here today from Unbelievable. So I'd like to introduce Susannah Grant, Executive Producer, Showrunner, Writer, and Director, Sarah Timberman, Executive Producer, and Elizabeth Devine, Technical Advisor. Based on a true story, Netflix's limited series Unbelievable followed a young woman accused of fabricating her sexual assault. The show has been nominated for so many awards, WGA, PGA, Golden Globe Awards, has won so many awards, Critics' Choice Award, the PEN America Award for Television Excellence, a Peabody Award, and was selected as one of AFI's Television Programs of the Year. These wins were in no small part due to the show's groundbreaking portrait of the aftermath of sexual violence, but the show is also really notable for its inclusion of accurate depictions of gun safety. And I'd like to show one of those moments right now.
Hey.
Hey.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. We're hungry.
Did she eat?
A little.
My first question is for Susannah and Sarah. What inspired you to make time for this depiction of gun storage in Unbelievable?
I'll jump in first. I wish I could say that I went into this saying I want to be 100% respectful in our portrayal of gun storage. I was a bit naive on that front. Instead, what I wanted to do was make sure that our portrayal of these characters was as authentic and real as it could possibly be. I thought that there's been, the issue of sexual assault is one that people are really happy to ignore in our culture. And I thought if we get anything wrong here, if we don't feel authentic and real and true, we might not hold people, you know? So we very quickly enlisted the help of Elizabeth Devine, and I'll let you talk about your credentials, Liz, but she went over every script and showed us at every moment when we were straying from proper protocol. And one of the first things she identified was how these officers would handle their their firearms as they came in and out of the house. And so that was really important, just to give the show the authenticity that I thought it deserved.
There's another thing about the show worth noting, which is that in so many ways, it's about the contrast between poor police training and strong police training in terms of the dual investigations that the show explores. So it made a lot of sense that Susannah wrote those scenes and Liz gave us the expert advice that she did in the case of officers who really had better training, because, you know, it's two separate things, intent and then training. And obviously in this moment, we wish that there was the right kind of training among departments all over the country. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So Elizabeth, turn to you. Why was it important to you to show Merritt's character safely storing her gun, and what obstacles did you deal with in creating those scenes?
Well, I think what we were trying to do, you know, and Susannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but we really wanted to show that these were real people. So we wanted to show Detective Duval, that was Merritt's character, but also her transitioning home from this very difficult job that she does. And then, you know, she has a child, she has 2 young daughters, she's married. There's a transition that comes when you walk in the door. You have to put that stuff away and be that in the moment with your family. And I think a good transitional moment is, what does she do with her gun? And you don't see that on TV very often because it takes up time. And I think, at least in my experience being a tech advisor and a writer, you know, they want to do everything that propels the story. And I think in our case, it did propel the story because it was showing these women that can do these difficult jobs, and the juggling act specifically that females in law enforcement do is amazing. And we wanted to show that. And so, you know, we did have, you know, the safe and make sure that she locked it up. But we also wanted it to be very routine for her. We didn't make it a big moment or you know, she was talking while she was doing it because it was her routine. As far as difficulties, you know, the tone comes from the top. So Susannah and Sarah and our other executives and the directors, I mean, everybody wanted it to be as authentic as possible. So all a technical advisor can do is advise. We can't tell them to take our advice. We're going to tell them how it really would happen. And then what I try to do is say, okay, I see what you want to do in this scene. This is how we can make it authentic and still get the point across, or get the scene and get what you want across in your scene, but yet keep it real. So it has to come from the top. The tech advisors, if you don't include them early on and you're trying to fix something on the day, it isn't going to work. And that's why a lot of shows don't show this stuff, because they don't think of it. And, you know, you can't just add a safe on the day and have someone do it. You have to be prepared. So I was happy to work with, you know, executives like Susannah and Sarah who listened to me and wanted to make it as real as possible. That's the easiest job in the world. I just tell them how it is and they put it in the script and then we do it. It's a piece of cake.
You do have to hold on to it as a priority all throughout, though. You know, right. When we were looking for locations, there were a lot of locations that would have worked except for the safe. You know, there were locations that would have been great, but where do we put the safe? And there's always that moment when you're making, at every stage of production, where you're saying to yourself, can we do without it? You know, and so you do have to remind yourself of your priorities as you go along, because there will be reasons to abandon them at every turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it jumped out, at least to me, and I think so many people were watching it, as it was such a crucial part of her character. And oftentimes, even when we watch other television, you do see other characters who are basically developed in the same way, to be like responsible gun owners or to be responsible law enforcement, where they would normally follow certain protocols, but those aren't shown necessarily. Chief Isom, I was wondering how this sort of depiction rang true for you, or why you think it's important to see these kinds of responsible firearm use and secure storage depicted on TV. especially by law enforcement.
Right. Well, you know, television and media is a powerful tool for cultural change, and you often don't see responsible gun storage in many movies or television shows that you see on TV. So it's really important that we start to normalize this type of safe, responsible behavior with guns. And it's really easy to do as you look through the clip. I mean, you walk in, you place it in the safe, and you move on. It really was just a normal activity that went on in the character's home every day. And so, you know, media has done a good job of changing people's attitudes about drunk driving, about drugs, about smoking. And so this is a way in which we could do it with gun safety. You know, we know that there were about 350 cases of unintentional shootings by young people under 18 who had access to a gun that wasn't stored properly. And most people might say that this doesn't affect them, but if they don't have a gun, but you know, you might be at someone's house, your child might be at someone's house, and there is a gun that is accessible to young people, and an unintentional shooting happens. So, you know, I think this is a very important medium for us to make change. And, you know, Everytown has a program called Be Smart that really ask parents to ask about guns in the home when their children are there, talk about responsible gun storage. So the hope is that more of this will happen, and we'll get the message out that storing your guns is going to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that. And it actually reminds me, I mean, those numbers have even gone up during coronavirus. So the number of unintentional shootings by children is up 43% in March and April of this year versus March and April of last year. And that's partly because there's so many children at home, they're not all being supervised, and parents aren't necessarily locking up guns, which is why when you have a character who would always lock up their gun, it's so, it could actually change norms long-term if people saw that depicted consistently. I wanted to just shift for a moment and ask Dan and Elizabeth, based on your law enforcement background, is there one thing that you think TV gets wrong consistently when depicting gun violence?
Chief, you can go first.
Well, it's so impersonal. I mean, I'm sure Elizabeth has seen it. You know, we've become desensitized in some ways to really the harm and the horrific nature of gun violence. It is really something that's horrific up close, not only the physical, but the emotional toll that it takes. And I think people don't realize, even for law enforcement officers, if you have to use deadly force, it's something that you carry with you for the rest of your life. There's no glorification of having to use a weapon on someone, even in the performance of their duty. So, you know, I do think a lot of it is entertainment, but in some ways, it really makes people think that guns are really not that dangerous or not that violent. So I think that's sort of the thing that people get lost in.
Right. I also see that the transition between work and home on television isn't always portrayed. So, you know, in the television shows that I watch where cops are home, it just seems like they've always just got their gun there. It's on the counter. It's in their, you know, pocket. And I understand they do that because they want the action shot. Someone's coming to their house, but that's not how most cops do it. So you know, they don't just walk around their home with their guns, with their teenagers around. And, you know, on that last subject, if you don't think your kids know where your gun is, if you have a gun, it's ridiculous. Kids know where everything is. You think you've got something hidden, it's not hidden. Those kids will go, oh, Mom, you left it over here. I know it, I have 3 kids. They know where stuff is. So you've got to lock it up, you've got to secure it, and I wish we'd see more of it on TV because it just isn't shown at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask Sarah and Susannah, I mean, Susannah, you had said you hadn't necessarily planned for this from the outset, but now having having done the depiction and heard like the impact that it's had, I guess I was wondering what would you like other showrunners or writers to take from your experience in creating this, or anything else that I guess Elizabeth and you guys were working on behind the scenes in terms of making these scenes work?
Well, one thing I was aware of, and I'm sure this is also because Elizabeth is also a writer, so she was sort of conscious of our dual demands here, but everything that she told us that we weren't used to seeing, for instance, the gun storage, it only made it more dramatically interesting. You know, it was never a hindrance to our storytelling. It was always enhancing of it. So I think a lot of it is just about doing the work and having the curiosity about what actually these lives are like and how they're lived and responsibly. And you'll always find something that's more interesting than the fantasy that's been, put out there.
I think I would agree with everything Susannah just said. And I feel that she, as a writer, paid so much close attention to and it's true, the details in the story were utterly fascinating, and the procedural stuff informed the character beats, everything that was procedural enhanced what the character story that we were telling too. So it all goes, I think, hand in hand narratively. But I think the degree of integrity with which Susannah approached the material was exceptional, and the attention to detail, while we diverged from the personal lives of these detectives, the work that they did was, I think, very faithfully recognized in the show, and we couldn't have done it without Elizabeth. I mean, it's to even call you a technical consultant seems, we need a better title.
Full partner.
But full partner. She was there for every moment of it and just was able to amplify what Susannah was intending to do in terms of taking that kind of care in the writing.
And I think gave us all a degree of confidence in what we were doing. I know that's true for the actors. They all felt so much more confident in their portrayal having Elizabeth there. I just think anybody who would ever try to do a show like this without her would be out of their mind.
And I think it's true, though, the time that Elizabeth spent with Merritt, who is such a careful and, research-driven kind of actor. She really wants to know the truth of what, her experience and her character's experience. So that was just invaluable for her.
She asked a lot of questions, and they were all good.
Yep.
And it's different when you're reading or you're writing or you're advising. These actors have to actually encapsulate these characters. And one of the things that I've learned just talking to actors and working with them is they just want to look like they've done it a million times, and they want to be comfortable. So, Merritt was one that asked a lot of questions. Tony kind of didn't, but then her questions were very direct. So it would be on one certain thing in one line. And, they're all going to be different, but it's very important that they feel comfortable. And that's one of the reasons I'm there, is to make sure that they feel comfortable in the shoes of those characters that they're trying to portray, which I find very difficult. I could never do that job. But, so I appreciate the questions, and, I'm right there so they can stop in the middle of a scene and ask me a question if they need to.
There was a lot more debate in those scenes about how much junk would be on the kitchen counter of two full-time working cops and how you go about handling your firearms, which we were very precise about, thanks to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, the precision shows, and I think, one thing that we are always in our culture work when we're working with writers and showrunners and others is trying to convey like that reality is interesting. And obviously a lot of writers and a lot of showrunners already get that, but actually delving into this minutia and nailing it the way that it happens in the actual world is so much more compelling. And I think this is proof point of that. So I want to thank all of you for giving us such a incredible moment. and for joining us for this conversation and being a part of National Gun Violence Awareness Day. So thank you all for joining.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you
work
for having us.
and thanks for the work of Everytown.
Yeah.
Thank you.